The phone rang in my cold kitchen. "Your mother's been detained for shoplifting at Harbor Mart." I let the salt jar slip from my hand. But when her medical bracelet beeped, someone had skimmed the code, I knew this was worse than petty theft. And it would pull others down with it. I yanked on a wool jacket that still smelled like engine grease from the marina. Outside the window, Narragansett Bay was darkening like a spreading ink stain. Wind flogged the row of dock posts. I'm 52. My knees click when I hurry, but I still move like a man who's worked outdoors, slow, steady, breathing even. My mother, Evelyn, is 78, widowed 20 years, her memory like an old clock that sometimes skips a gear. But she has never been a thief. Not once. Harbor Mart was awash in hard white neon, cold as the seafood freezer. At the entrance stood a cop with folded arms, her badge winking under the lights. Officer Dana Pike. On the other side, my mother sat in a metal chair, her plum-colored knit cap snug on her head, hands resting on her knees, index finger trembling. Next to her, a woman around 40, with dry blonde hair and a soft caretaker smile. Marla, the daytime aide I'd hired through Baybridge Home Care. "You're Mrs. Mercer's son?" Officer Pike asked. "I'm Dan," I said, holding my breath down. "You called about shoplifting." Pike glanced at the store's security guard, a kid who still smelled like hairspray. "Cameras show your mother placing items in a tote without scanning them. There's a fentanyl pain patch in the basket and no receipt. We've written it up." I looked at my mother. She lifted her face, gray, watery eyes, confused, like she'd been shaken awake from a nap. "Son," she whispered, "I was just looking for my glucose meter. It's in all my bags. I don't recognize this red basket." The tote at her feet, red, clean, with fresh handles. My mother carries a frayed green canvas tote, its mouth worn thin. I drew a breath and picked up the red bag. "This isn't my mother's." "She probably mixed them up," Marla cut in, her voice strangely soft. "She gets confused." I only stick close to help. I glanced at my mother's left wrist. Her medical bracelet was there. Cool steel, etched Evelyn Mercer, type 2 diabetes, opioid allergy, QRNFC. I laid a finger on it. At the slightest touch, the bracelet quivered and let out a thin, bat-like beep. The guard's handheld scanner flashed green. Scan accepted, though no one had brought it near. "Stop," I said. "Who just scanned my mother's QR code?" The guard startled. Pike frowned. Marla stalled, then smiled. "Maybe the device auto-read it. Too close." "Can't," I said evenly. "It only triggers with a credentialed medical device. And my mother is allergic to opioids. She wouldn't take that patch." Pike opened her notebook. "We'll transport her to St. Bridget's ER. If there's a medical issue, the hospital can verify. The tote will be held as evidence." I bent and took my mother's hand. She squeezed, weak but sure. "I'm cold," she whispered. I slipped my scarf around her shoulders, listening to the neon hum like breath fogging a window. St. Bridget Memorial sits on a low hill, rain slicking its steps. The revolving door an hourglass. In the emergency room, disinfectant fought with the smell of weak coffee from a vending machine. Nurse Lydia Cho, mid-40s, hair tied taut, scanned my mother's bracelet. The screen spit out blue lines, then halted on a red one. "Opioid administered, outpatient clinic, 3 days ago." It felt like my forehead hit a deck beam. "No," I said, cutting in before Lydia could look up. "Her doctor doesn't give opioids." "She's allergic. I took her to that visit. 3 days ago, we only did an A1C and picked up test strips, no patch. The EHR shows, Lydia lowered her voice. There's a signature, E. Mercer, accepting an alternative analgesic. Let me see. I didn't like my voice, dry, with a thin, angry edge like a razor wire. Lydia handed me a printed log, a photo of the signature. The E looped too big. My mother's E is small and quick, hooking downward. Has been all her life. Whoever did this didn't know her E curls at the end. It doesn't balloon at the start. I looked at my mother. She sat worrying the corner of the scarf between thumb and forefinger, the same motion from the old days when she waited for my father to drop anchor. John, she said, I don't want to hurt, but No, I'm allergic. Your dad used to say, don't touch what makes your throat itch. Marla sat close, eyes tracking the screen like a shopper reading a price board. Probably a system mix-up, she said, rubbing Mom's shoulder, her other hand clamped around a small wallet. EHRS mess up all the time. Lydia flicked a glance at the wallet, quick, and looked back at me. I remember your mom. She's been here often. Dr. Harrison always notes avoid opioids. I'll check the paper logs. Thank you. I nodded. Pike stood at the door, hands behind her back, wearing official calm, but I saw a little awkwardness in the posture, maybe the early sense she'd trusted the wrong thing first. As Lydia left, I studied my mother's bracelet. A hairline scrape circled the clasp, like someone had pried it open and snapped it back, not skillfully. Marla, I said slowly, has anyone been taking Mom's bracelet off when I'm not there? She smiled gently. I sometimes remove it when she baths. The hot water bothers her. Mom, I turned. Do you remember who takes it off? She lifted her eyes, fog searching for shore. Marla is kind, she said. She helped me find my bag that day. The green one. Then it turned red. My stomach fell like a rushed anchor. Switched bag, I said under my breath. Pike stepped up. We'll keep her for observation. You can head home. No, I said. I'm staying. Night came early, like a heavy blanket. I sat in a plastic chair, listening to the heater wheeze. Lydia returned with a stack of printouts. I found the outpatient paper log. There are 2 entries. One original, avoid opioids, a later add-on, different pen, trial small patch, under supervision. The signature, E. Mercer. I don't believe it's your mother's. She set down another page. EHR access log. There's a tablet registered to Baybridge Home Care that accessed your mother's chart 3 days ago. 4:18 p.m. I swallowed. 4:18 was when I ran to the truck for her coat. Cold rain came suddenly. In the waiting room, Marla sat close to my mother, chatting about a little patch for back pain the doctor just recommended. Pikes, I said, keeping my tone level. You still have the evidence tote? In the property room, she said. We can't open it without paperwork. I need you to check if her glucose meter is in there. Mom always carries it. If it's not, the red tote isn't hers, and someone switched it. Pike watched me, weighing it. She turned away, made a short call, then nodded. Let's go to the cage. The little room smelled of paper and tape. Pike set the red tote on the table. Gloved, she opened it. Inside, cheap cookies, 2 oranges, a pain patch, and a white appointment card. Elliot Marsh, outpatient clinic, 3:45 p.m. I didn't know who Elliot Marsh was, but my spine went cold. Where's her meter? I asked. Not here, Pike said, shoulders sinking. But whose card is this? I snapped a photo, my hand shaking a little. Pike exhaled. "I'm calling a detective." Her voice had crossed a threshold. "This is starting to smell." By the next morning, Detective Rosa Mendel arrived. Gray wool coat, low voice, steady brown eyes. She listened to me, to Lydia, and studied my mother's bracelet through a loop. "Tool marks," she murmured. "Clumsy, but enough." "A ring?" I asked. "Could be," she said. "We've seen this pattern. Caregivers inside staff, pharmacists under sales pressure, plus someone on the insurance side eager to add riders for profit." Pike stood near, stiff. I looked at her. She caught my eyes, gave a short nod, the nod of someone owning her early misstep. Mendel sought a quick warrant on Baybridge Home Care. Before it was signed, she took me back to Harbor Mart to talk to the pharmacist. Owen Patel at the counter looked young and sleep-starved behind his glasses. His voice cracked when he saw the detective, and when she laid out photos, scratched bracelet clasp, the Marsh card, Baybridge tablet logs, he broke. I followed the speedwork flow. Caregivers bring a tablet, scan the patient QR, and I finalize. Management says if the system lights green, we fill. "My mother's allergic to opioids," I said. "I know. Well, I saw the red flag, but there was a new note saying the doctor approved a small trial," Owen stammered. "I thought the doctor changed his mind." Mendel didn't shout. She asked, "Who brings the tablet?" Owen glanced around and whispered, "Marla. Sometimes the shift manager, a redhead. They say elderly can't stand in line." I was wrong. Wrong. The word flopped onto the counter like a fish, then lay still. The Baybridge warrant cleared that afternoon. Their office was a low building that smelled oversprayed with air freshener. Filing cabinets held patient signature copies. Mendel tapped a thick folder labeled EM. Inside, E. Mercer repeated across forms, the stroke morphing. Someone had hurried to learn my mother's signature and kept losing it. Pike, careful this time, wore gloves and slid open a drawer. A Baybridge key fob fell out, along with a clear plastic card. On the card was a tiny QR and, God, Elliot Marsh printed at the corner. "Patient badge," Pike said softly. I looked at her. She flushed, then straightened. I didn't hate her. I just felt older. In a small conference room, Mendel questioned Marla. First the tears came, low pay, bills, pressure. Then the detective pressed her phone to the table and played a thread of texts. Tonight, 3 patches, 2 meters, 1 shower chair, scan Mercer before 6. M. The M belonged to Marla's manager. Marla went silent. The silence was heavy as lead. "We'll be working with the DA," Mendel said. "You can cooperate." Marla stared at her hands. On her left wrist, a cheap plastic bead bracelet had a chunk missing. My mother once said, "She wears a bracelet like the girl down the street used to." Cute. I felt my throat tighten. News spreads fast in a small town. Some said I'd made a mess and hurt good caregivers. Others said I did right. It's about protecting the old. My sister, Sarah, called from Florida. "Dan, Mom needs peace. Are you going to bring the whole company down? Who'll care for her if you do?" "I'm not dragging anyone down," I said, slipping into the old childhood pronoun. "I'm hauling the truth up." And Mom's dignity? People will talk about shoplifting forever. I'll tell the whole thing. Slowly. Clearly. So they see it's one shard in a bigger picture. That night I sat by the stove and sifted through Medicare statements. Items we never had. A shower chair, a new glucose meter, patches, a cane with a special grip. I sorted them into stacks. Each stack was a small cut in whatever trust I had left in this world. At arraignment, Marla stood behind the rail, eyes swollen. The Bay Bridge manager walked past in cuffs, lips tight. An outpatient clerk, the one who altered the paper logs, kept her head down. Owen wasn't charged. He was disciplined, retrained, and started volunteering at church to make amends. Pike took a reprimand for her rushed opening move and later received commendation for helping crack the ring. The town fought. Do we have to be so tough on caregivers? What about other elders? Who learns what lesson? As for my mother, she was exonerated. Mendel came to our house, sat with weak tea, and said slowly, "You didn't steal anything. You were a victim. We're sorry." Pike gave a handwritten note. Neat script. I was wrong to trust the first thing I saw. I will do better. Mom tucked the letter into the wooden box where she keeps my father's old notes. After that, the parish launched a community care circle. Ladies brought cookies. Men hauled folding chairs. A college kid installed a doorbell camera. I started a Saturday noontime talk at the marina. Protecting Your Medical Data 101. I taught the elders how to tell a real QR from a fake, how to ask a nurse before signing, how to annotate a medical bracelet. I spoke slowly. I left quiet spaces for breathing. Lydia brought a printed copy of the hospital's new Elder Safe check. I keep it like a charm. It isn't perfect, but it's a boat. For the old, a boat is half of hope. A week later, my mother's bracelet beeped again. This time in the eye clinic, when a curious intern tapped it. Just wanted to see how the info pops up. The access log caught his name. Mendel messaged me with a tired smile. More training to do. I felt older again, but I didn't let go. Winter arrived on schedule. Morning frost sugared the steps. Mom sat by the window facing the docks, fingers touching the bracelet like it was an old seashell. Once, she said, your father tied the anchor line like he tied a promise. Tight, but it could come loose if it needed to. I smiled. I'm learning to tie those promises too. I cooked oatmeal and dusted it with cinnamon. The table creaked when I set her bowl down. She ate slowly, chewing as if pulling scattered memories into one place. I felt calm. Not because everything was fixed, but because I knew I was standing where I needed to be. In the kitchen, with the cinnamon smell, with an old woman who deserved to be believed. In the afternoon, we walked the pier. The water dimpled. Gulls argued over a strip of dried fish near the planks. Her bracelet tapped the wood rail, a tiny sound. I told the story again, like a fairy tale. The switched tote, the altered log, the pried open clasp, the caregiver's tablet, the pressured pharmacist, the officer's mistake and repair, the patient detective, the court, the letter. I told it slowly, pausing at the places that needed air. She nodded. Sometimes she asked again. I answered. We weren't trying to beat memory, just to keep it from slipping through the slats. That evening, I opened my laptop and went to a forum. For the first time, I wrote exactly like this, in the first person. Am I wrong for taking it all the way? Sending the caregiver to jail and helping topple the company, knowing my mother might be remembered for shoplifting forever? I'm afraid I hurt good caregivers out there, threw shade on a whole field, but I'm more afraid of this. Elders in our town getting scanned, patched with things not meant for them, having their names borrowed to bill for what they never use. I'm Dan, Evelyn's son. I don't want to be a hero. I just don't want my mother, or anyone like her, turned into a number in a data warehouse. I hit post. The screen lit. Comments poured like a sudden squall. Some called me heavy-handed. Some called me a good son. Some said, buy the book. Some told stories of their father's codes being skimmed. Some asked why the pharmacist wasn't charged more. Some asked mercy for Marla. Some said judge individuals, not a whole profession. I read each line. I thanked people slowly. I didn't argue. I answered with what I'd seen, touched, and heard. The trembly beep on an old woman's wrist. Mom went to bed early. I shut her door, listened to the heater, and the sea tapping the rocks like someone breathing evenly in the dark. On the table lay Pike's letter, Lydia's checklist, and a clean calendar. I marked Saturday. Marina Talk, Elder Safe 101. Before lights out, I looked at my mother's bracelet. The etching was cold and clear. I set my hand over it lightly. Thank you, I said to that unfeeling thing, as if it were a friend who beeped at just the right moment and pulled us from a mire. Then I spoke to my father's shadow in the old wedding photo. I tied a new knot. Tight, but I can loosen it if I need to. Outside, wind keened along the roof like a soft whistle. I slept knowing tomorrow would bring more argument and more comments, some kind, some cruel. But in the middle of them is my mother, her bracelet locked properly, her story told in the right rhythm. And if someone asks me again whether I was wrong, I'll say, if protecting one person exposes the rot in a system, then I'll choose that wrong again, and forever. Sunday morning, church bells rang. Mendel texted, caught another intern snooping, training scheduled, thank you. I replied with a photo of the harbor, bright water, idle boats, anchor lines coiled neat like a kept promise. I poured coffee, set it by the oatmeal, and called softly, Mom. She came slow, but her eyes were warm. She touched her wrist. I smiled. And the story, the one someone tried to shrink into petty theft, now rests where it belongs. A caution, a thin seam of light, a knot tightened so we don't slip free. I know some will say I ruined certain people's reputations. I know others will say thank you. I don't need to win the argument. I only need afternoons like this one. Briny wind, a complaining wood floor, the steam off oatmeal, and my mother's medical bracelet quiet on her wrist, like a small anchor, keeping us from drifting.